I'm JG Michael, and this is Parallax Views. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the show, we're going to have a double feature, 2 interviews, 1 episode. But first, I need to remind you that this show is entirely listener-funded, so please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. I shouldn't say entirely listener-funded, actually, because I do have one sponsor, Mike Swanson of wallstreetwindow.com, a great financial and trading newsletter. Check it out now at wallstreetwindow.com. I've had listeners make an investment on Mike's trading tips. Sign up for the free newsletter. You won't regret it. wallstreetwindow.com. And with that being said, on this edition of the program, later in the show, we'll be hearing from Ionnis Vlahos of antiwar.com about how Gen Z is tired of war. But first, I'll be speaking with Howard Polskin of The Writing with an R, a website devoted to tracking what is going on in the media ecosystem of the right wing. Highly recommend checking out Howard's website. It's very useful, and I hope it will give an insight into where the American right wing is today. What is their focus? What are they talking about? What do they think about the Trump administration, where the Democrats are? All that and more discussed in this conversation to follow. So let's get right to it with Howard Polskin. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Parallax Views, a guest that I'm very happy to have on the show. Howard Polskin is the president of the website The Writing, which tracks right-wing media and news outlets. And it's a crazy job, I take it. I guess we'll get into that. How are you doing, Howard Polskin?
I think I'm sane. I'm doing okay. Been doing this 9 years, and I'm still a functioning adult.
So you got into this through the first Trump term in 2017, correct? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I watched prior to the 2016 election with some amusement. I'm a New York City resident, so Trump was always something of a joke, but an entertaining joke. But I didn't really think he was going to win. So in the morning after the election, and I woke up and I thought, like, how the hell did this happen? And the following week, I was in upstate New York, in a very red area in upstate New York. And some of the people I was at dinner with, they were just all in on Trump, and they were quoting from websites I had never heard of before. And when I got back home, I started looking at places. I'd never been to even like foxnews.com, nationalreview.com. I started going to some of the more conventional right-wing websites, and then started going to the ones, really far out there, like InfoWars and Breitbart. And it was an eye-opener. And I thought, I wish someone could just take 15 headlines a day and push it to me so I could dip my toe into right-wing media, get a sense of what half the country is thinking. And no one was doing it. So that's when opportunity opened the door, and I walked through.
So it's interesting because when you reached out, I'd thought about how many guests I've had on that are part of the sort of right-wing ecosystem. I consider myself I would probably be defined as being from the left. I have some overlaps with libertarians on very, very select issues, and even some conservatives. So I've had guests on from websites like The American Conservative, and I read publications like First Things and The Imaginative Conservative. But these are sort of like an intellectual, sort of philosophical wing of right-wing media. How influential really are those sites, and what are the ones that are more influential? Because it sounds like there's multiple wings. There's more that are focused on philosophy, and then there's others that are focused on just rage bait.
Yes. That's very, very smart analysis. I would say that the way to check what's most influential is to go to Truth Social and follow Trump and see what he's linking to. So, in fact, I did that. And I had for 3 months, 2 years ago, I tracked everything that he was looking at and what he was linking to. So the number one, the most influential are the editorial pages of the New York Post. Highly influential. He would also, obviously, Fox News is highly influential, and certainly the primetime hosts are highly influential. But you would get even smaller things on there, like very obscure right-wing websites. He might be linking to a dozen times a month. So let's flip it around the other way. If when Joe Biden was president, if he ever linked to me, I would be made in the shade. I would get so many subscribers. So it's, part of the way when the Trump administration links to some of these smaller right-wing websites, he is really gaining their loyalty for years because it is such a boost in visibility and prominence for these sites. And some sites he ignores, but he's pretty he sprinkles his affections out there among a few dozen websites.
So you have a list of the ones that have been most influential, at least in terms of visits, from June 2026. And right at the top is still Fox News, Breitbart, Gateway Pundit, True Social, and then Newsmax. Why are these sites the most popular ones?
Well, certainly Fox News, because I mean they have so much content on there. I mean, but whether you're left, right, or center, I maintain you could be reasonably well informed if you read nothing else but foxnews.com. You would still get an idea of what's going on in the world. You'd have a pretty good idea about it. The popularity of the Gateway Pundit absolutely mystifies me. I I go on that site and it's first of all it's a visual mess and most of the work seems repackaged from other places. It doesn't seem like a lot of original reporting. Even their own opinions in there don't make much sense to me. Breitbart also seems to mystify me a lot. They do post a lot, but a lot of it seems to be repackaged from other sources. Once you get into places like the American Conservative, which doesn't even crack my top 20. I mean, the work on that site is pretty thoughtful. Today, for instance, they just have a piece that is urging Trump to basically pull out of NATO, bring the European forces home. So that's like what you got to kind of pay attention when a conservative outlet says that. But some of them are truly wacky and offensive. Town Hall today, Kurt Schlichter, a very talented writer, but very far right. He's got a piece today that says the left-wing women are an abomination. It's like, whoa, that is pretty harsh.
Yeah, it's interesting because reading over that list, I realized I'm sort of in a bubble because even the conservative media that I consume just to engage with it, like you said, something like TAC or the American Conservative, that doesn't really even crack the top 10. I don't even think it's on the
No, it's
top
on the
20.
top 20. It's not even in the top 20.
Right. So even in my own way, even when I'm trying to engage with conservative media that I may agree with on some things and disagree on other things, even a lot of that media that I've been consuming, I didn't realize it's not as it may be influential to a certain sort of milieu of people and maybe policy wonks, but really it's not in the sort of mainstream. It's kind of interesting what is though. Like I think number 6 on the list was the I always mispronounce it. I think it's Epoch Times.
Yes, I can. Yes, if you can pronounce that right, please help me. Yes, I think first of all they put out a lot of content. They have a lot of content, and I think they have a pretty sophisticated organization behind it. Yeah, but I find it hard to wade through that site.
Well, what is it about the websites that are most popular that have caused them to be the sort of go-tos? Is it just the sort of what you mentioned earlier, the Trump factor, or is it also maybe the style of these websites?
Part of it is the volume. It's I mean that's the name of the game in websites. You got to always put out a lot of content, um, draw a lot of eyeballs to you. It's also, I would say, outrage sells, and outrage gets attention. So that's why in right-wing podcasting, someone like Candace Owens, who says outrageous, offensive things, is one of the fastest growing right-wing podcasts because that kind of outrage and outrageousness is getting her a lot of attention.
So let me play I won't say it's like devil's advocate, but like I said, I didn't realize how much of a bubble I'm in, even with the right wing media or conservative media that I've engaged with. So I've always looked at stuff like Breitbart or Newsmax or the Epoch Times as just why would I read this? This is just kooky. And I guess that's why if I was going to read right wing websites, it would be the stuff like First Things or the stuff with a more academic sort of glean, even if I disagreed with it. Why do you think it's important to maybe engage these websites that do get into the more out there end of things?
Because sometimes that stuff gets echoed by the Trump administration. It's kind of the canary in the coal mine. It may represent the very far right, but sometimes some of those ideas move into mainstream. Certainly, I would submit that election denying from the 2020 election is
It's
a
gone
very
mainstream.
yeah. I mean, tonight, here we are on July 16th, and Trump's speech tonight, and everything that I read says that he's going to get into election denying. And I think election denial is probably a strategy for how the Trump administration is going to face about the 2026 midterms. If the Republicans turn in a poor performance, I can certainly see the Trump administration crying, that the elections were rigged, and I think this is just the first salvo.
So one interesting aspect of the writing is that you don't take a I don't think your approach is necessarily the same as a lot of critiques of right wing media. I think you try to just lay out the headlines, and also you don't take a sensational approach to or sensationalistic approach. Can you talk a little bit more about your approach and what you're seeking to accomplish with it? Because I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it.
I I originally thought when I started the first 2 years when I was doing the writing, I did not have any commentary on the top of my free newsletter. I just put the headlines out there. If you really didn't go too deep in the site, you wouldn't even know who was behind the site. It was kind of like a utility, just putting it out there to people. And I was a little nervous to have my point of view out there. I didn't want to get attacked. But the more after a year and a half, 2 years of doing it, in fact, I was developing a sharp point of view, and I wanted to express that, and I felt comfortable doing it, trying to toe the line without being too offensive, but I still wanted to get my 2 cents in there. And when things bothered me, I would say so. For instance, Hegseth saying he wants to test all service members for their testosterone. Today I wrote like, what do you think of the balls of Secretary of Defense Hegseth? I call him Pete Hairgel Hegseth. I call Trump the portly POTUS. I'm not above a little bit of name calling. And part of me thinks like, oh, why am I sinking to their level? On the other hand, it's like, um, I feel that the situation warrants it from time. I don't go overboard on it, but I certainly dip my toe into name calling.
How important is it for you to sort of not just maybe attack these sort of websites, but also sort of understand the viewpoint of people who are visiting these websites or agreeing with these websites? Because I think you've even said on other podcasts that you've had people reach out to you from like the Heritage Foundation that talk to you about, your work. Can you talk a little bit about what is the importance of sort of understanding the right wing rather than just being
Critic.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Looking my nose
Sorry for
down.
my loss of
Yes,
words there.
exactly. I mean, that's so important. And the Heritage Foundation, someone from the Heritage Foundation actually reached out to me about 4 years ago and said, wow, we enjoyed your piece in the Columbia Journalism Review on Conservative Media. If you're ever in Washington, stop by. And in fact, the next month I was in Washington and I did stop by. And to this day, that person is a friend of mine and a good resource. And and I always say to him, we probably disagree on 90% of politics. But if I need an email or a phone number, if I don't understand something coming from the right, I will not hesitate to pick up the phone and that person will help me. I'm invited to the Heritage Foundation Christmas party in New York every year. And I go. I do feel like a cat at a dog show, but I go. There's a website. There's a guy in New Hampshire who writes a conservative website, Conservative View from New Hampshire. Again, I disagree with almost everything that he writes, but we speak to each other 4 or 5 times a year. I was going to go up to New Hampshire for the New Hampshire primaries. And when he found out about it, he called me up and he said, if you want, you're more than welcome to stay at my house. And it was like, wow, like that, I was really touched by that. And, he had some health challenges. So I weigh in with him and I just check to see how he's doing. Even though sometimes when I read his work on a daily basis, I scratch my head and I would go like, oh, this stuff is so out there. It's just, but I never try to convince the other side to my point of view. I kind of think like this is where we're at. And if, sometimes if I can have a constructive dialogue with someone on the right and we can get to something of a middle ground, maybe there's hope for the country.
Now, are there times where you're reading through conservative media and it's helping you, I guess, sharpen your own thinking and even being able to maybe critique their arguments more? Because maybe, for instance, when I read something like The American Conservative, even when I disagree, I can find maybe the kernel of truth or agreement and then work from there with what I disagree with. Do you think the writing and the work you're doing helps to sort of sharpen critiques and also find points where, hey, we have to understand where maybe this conservative outlet has a small kernel of truth, but here's where they're getting things wrong?
Yes, yes, that's it. And it may not be like when you say getting things wrong.
Right.
So it may not be they're getting things wrong. It's just, their point of view. I mean,
Right. There's different, I guess, principles they're working on.
yes. I mean, when you break it down, the difference between, conservative and a liberal, conservatives want small government. They don't want a lot of taxes, too much government. It's kind of like, yeah, I understand that, but still, I'm kind of like, there are people on the bottom of society who need help. They need a social net. And isn't the mark of a healthy society, generous society, is the ability to help those who need help. So, that's where it comes from. And that's why, it spills over into the immigration discussion, spills over in a lot of different areas.
Mhm. Well, where do you see any fissures within the sort of conservative movement? Because you're tracking all of this. Are there sort of internal debates?
Sure. I mean, obviously, the war in Iran is, right at the top of the list. No question about it. I saw it, during COVID. I saw in the beginning of COVID, there was a little bit of a split opinion on First of all, whether the pandemic was as bad as we thought it was, and that was for the first maybe 4 weeks or so. Then it was to mask or not mask, and then later on it became to jab or not jab. But ultimately, it became more, anti-mask, anti-jab. Everyone go out and pretend like there's no pandemic out there. But there were certainly fissures before that.
Where do you see conservative media heading forward? And also, I should have asked this earlier. Since you started this in 2017, has there been developments that maybe people are overlooking? Because I mean, looking at the top websites ranked by visits, I mean, the Epoch Times, Newsmax, uh, they all heavily, I mean, those two in particular, heavily traffic in sort of conspiracy theories. And it's fascinating to think that, back in 2016, I think you had stuff like QAnon that was kind of within an echo chamber of 4chan or InfoWars. And now this has really gone mainstream in a way. Do you see that as a big development?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so, and listen, when you have someone like Trump and what comes out of his mouth, we just accept it now. It's barely news, some
Well,
of
it's
the,
like what you said about election denial. Like
yeah.
that's what everyone is saying is going to be the speech tonight. Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, that's Trump being Trump. It's like we just accept it. He calls, one of the top reporters in the New York Times is Maggie Haberman, who's got the best-selling book, Regime Change, with Jonathan Swan. He routinely refers to her as Maggot Haberman. Like, what? Like, this is this is okay. How does anyone support the President of the United States who uses terms like that? If you see some of the vile, I am on Truth Social every day. I follow one person on Truth Social, that is Donald J. Trump, and every day I'm astonished by what he's posting up there. The language he uses, his poor grammar, his poor spelling, and now he uses AI to create the most vile images imaginable. It's shocking.
What do you see as the biggest concerns when it comes to these websites? Like, I noticed these headlines are like really shocking to me, or really just the
That's my
left,
skill, finding those
right.
headlines. That's when
What's the
I'm like,
ones I noticed were the leftist women are an abomination, and then it's funny. You were yesterday. I think you had the headline from World Nut Daily. I mean World Net Daily. I'm sorry.
World
Of
Not Daily, World Not Daily. Yes, yes.
but they had that headline: Islam has no place in America's public life. It seems like these issues of just the rage at immigrants, particularly Muslims, and just rage at women.
Yes, yes. It's just, I mean, if a mainstream outlet had any of those headlines, I mean, they would be vilified. But it's just accepted. That's that's just another day at the office for these sites.
How much of it do you think? I hope this isn't a dumb question, but how much of this is driven by the sort of attention economy, and how much of it is sincerely held belief for these outlets?
Um, I
I hope
I
that's
can't
not too
crawl into their
speculative.
heads, nor do I want to crawl into their heads, but I think it's a little bit of both. Um, and again, going back to Candace Owens, in order to get yourself out there and known and to kind of like pop in a very noisy, crowded environment, you have to out crazy the competition. There's something about some places just put volume out there, like Fox News, and some just kind of out crazy the competition, like Candace Owens.
Right. So, what do you think the left or liberals, Democrats should understand about where the right wing is at right now? What are the sort of flashpoints that need to be understood at this moment in time?
Well, I always look at, who's the number one piñata of the time. So it's clearly the Graham Plattner was the gift that kept on giving in June. Um, Now it is certainly, Mondami and the Democratic Socialists. That drum is going to they're going to beat that drum all through the midterm elections. That is really important for them. Um, I'm the right-wing media always goes after and led by Trump, powerful women of color. That's a very that always seems to happen. I mean, Michelle Obama never goes out of style on the right, and it's funny because they were right-wing media. They were terrified that Michelle Obama was going to jump into the race for president in the summer 2 years ago. Um, but they never stop attacking her, and certainly attacking Joe and Jill Biden also is never goes out of favor. And that's why I was critical of Jill Biden putting her book out now. I think the Democrats did not need it. I frankly wish Joe Biden's book, I just learned yesterday it's coming out November 17th. I really don't think it's going to do the Democrats any favors because they love beating up on him.
Has the media ecosystem of the right wing changed in the past 10 years in any, I guess, important ways? I ask this because, I've known people that have talked about this issue of the right wing noise machine, even going back to when I was a teenager, when I would read websites like Daily Costs or, any number of websites, Mother Jones. The right wing noise machine is a long standing issue in American politics. Are there any significant changes we've seen since you've started doing this work with the writing?
Hmm. I think the growth of right-wing podcasts, right-wing YouTube, certainly have really come on very strong in the last few years.
Does
Um,
that change the way in which the ecosystem operates in some ways, or?
I think right-wing media, like mainstream and progressive media, they're all grappling with the same challenges.
Okay.
Uh, it's not like right-wing media drops and mainstream media keeps going on or even improves. It's not like that. They're really kind of track each other, and everyone's trying to migrate to different platforms to get their content out there, to get their point of view out there, to extend the brand as much as possible. We're all doing that to some extent.
Are there any issues that have sort of fallen by the wayside recently for the right wing that aren't as in the fore as they were maybe a few years ago? Yeah, I want to say that the woke stuff was kind of disappearing, but now I see they're flipping out about that Tom Cruise movie. So I guess that isn't
Yeah,
on the
woke
back
has
burner.
been, that's a good point. I think woke it's kind of died down a bit. I was surprised that Pride Month did not get attacked the way it had been the last 2 or 3 years. Certainly after the Bud Light marketing fiasco, Pride Month just was, it was shocking how homophobic it was for 4 weeks in like June of 2024. But this past June, I was pleasantly surprised to see that all the comments from the right on Pride Month were fairly muted.
Okay. So I'm not wrong to say that maybe it has uh, gone back a little, or maybe other issues have taken precedence. I
But
feel like the
again, that might have been everyone was paying attention to Plattner. They
well,
yeah,
that's what I not to interrupt you, but I feel like the big focus now is going after Mom Donnie, going after the DSA.
I think those are juicier targets and will have a payoff in the in the midterms. Certainly, transgenderism is always something that gets attacked. I haven't seen it the same way. It's kind of been a lot quieter, um, but I wouldn't say it's gone away. I mean, I expect attacks on transgenderism to surface again.
Before we close out, you mentioned the war with Iran. How significant do you think that is in terms of sort of internal debate within the right wing? Is it overstated, understated?
Um, I think right-wing media is grappling with it, and some voices on the right certainly are opposed to Trump's war, and justifiably so. But there are other right-wing voices and websites that are fully supportive of it. So it's really a mixed bag at this stage. I think what will ultimately happen once we get closer to the midterms is that Trump will be looking for a quick deal to drive oil prices down. He can't afford to have high oil prices, and he may be attacked for that from the right and the left or in the middle, but I think he's kind of factored that into his decision.
What do you hope my listeners get out of this particular 30 or so minutes we've had here?
Sure. I think that the takeaway would be if you come to my site or subscribe to my free newsletter for like 2 minutes a day, that's all,
Right.
you can get some insights into what the right is thinking. And it'll make you a better informed person. And you don't have to always drink from the fire hose of information from the mainstream and progressive media. You can dip your toe into another point of view and still be okay.
Do you closing out, what's your advice to Democrats, I guess?
Read the writing. Yeah, watch out. And yes, they should. There are some prominent Democrats who subscribe to the writing, and I think that's very smart of them. I definitely know some foreign embassies in Washington that subscribe to the writing because they're trying to find out what the administration is thinking, and the writing is a keyhole into that thinking. If I were Democrats, my advice to Democrats would be aim for the center. Enough with the left. You're not, if you go too far out there, you're going to lose. To win that's where you want to aim for the middle. You want to hit the middle of the country and win them over. You don't want to have policies or positions that are going to drive people in the middle to the right.
Well, thank you again, Howard Polskin, for coming on Parallax Views.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved your questions. They were great.
Next up, we'll be hearing from Ionnis Vlahos of antiwar.com to discuss his recent article on Gen Z being tired of war and being too aware to fall for the war propaganda. I think you'll find this to be an interesting conversation. It's a bit short, but I think that you'll find it enjoyable. So without any further ado, let's get right to it with Ionnis Vlahos of antiwar.com. Welcome to Parallax Views, a guest that I'm very, very happy to have on the show. He is an editorial assistant and writer for antiwar.com, studies history and journalism at George Mason University. I'm talking with Ionnis Vlahos. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing very good, and I was fascinated by this article you wrote for antiwar.com. Gen Z is tired of war. And I just wanted to delve into this topic with you. What inspired you to write the article?
Well, I've been feeling for a while, and I've been seeing for a while that a lot of people in my generation are growing very skeptical of U.S. foreign policy and U.S. government in general. And with the current and recent conflict in Iran, which is, as we all know, has been horribly managed and very deeply unpopular with many, of not all demographics in American society, I think that gave Gen Z the perfect example to, voice those opinions.
I know I didn't have this in the original notes I wrote, but I wanted to talk about, you think there's a big difference between Gen Z and millennials maybe and how they view war, because you talk about in the article how Gen Z's worldview was shaped by the war on terror, and maybe millennials and Gen Z were shaped in different ways by it.
I agree with that. For millennials, a lot of them saw 9/11 happen. It was a very pivotal moment in our nation's history. And of course, it was understandably a very traumatic event, even if you were not directly involved. And that event gave our administration at the time the push to be able to go into Iraq. But with Gen Z, we didn't witness that per se. We just witnessed the fallout from it, which, as we all know, was completely different and unexpected from what was originally, proposed when the Iraq War started. So yeah, we definitely saw it from a different perspective.
I don't know if you can get into it on your end, but as someone from Gen Z, what was your awakening, I guess, to these foreign policy issues and issues of war and peace?
Um, I was quite young, not too young, maybe about eighth grade or so, mid 2010s. Um, I got to that age where I started asking a lot of questions, and as I mentioned earlier, me as well as many other people my age, we grew up with the war on terror, and at a certain age, when you start thinking, I myself, for instance, I started to think, what are we doing there? Simply put. We obviously we don't, as Americans, we don't really have a connection to the Middle East. The reasons we were there were kind of vague, and we heard a lot of suffering about our soldiers going over there, but nothing really seems, to come out of it. And I think starting with that, just more questions. I think that's how it went for a lot of people.
How important do you think that is, that issue of not experiencing 9/11 firsthand, but only just the fallout? Because I think it does create a different relationship to American foreign policy for Gen Z than it does older generations. I think that's a very astute point on your part.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, it was a very pivotal and traumatic event for people who lived through it. But without that, emotional um, jar to your system, it's very hard to look at it and look at the reasons given for going to war after that as, anything other than, I don't know, dubious.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think Gen Z also saw up close, along with the rest of us, the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Mhm. It's true. I turned 18 that year, so it was a coming of age moment for a lot of us, and um, it's funny. We kind of grew up with that war, and to see how it ended, it wasn't so much as a tragedy as a lot of politicians put it out for us. It was just more like uh, we were mainly just indifferent, but also saw that, it just demonstrated the failure of American foreign policy and a lot of other ideas that, we've been thinking for a while.
Yeah, I think the exact term you used is the failure of American militarism, which
Exactly.
ties into that way that U.S. foreign policy has completely lost sight of the idea that diplomacy should be part of the foreign policy toolbox.
Hmm.
I also wanted to ask you, in terms of this article, um, you said something really interesting about Gen Z knows too much. I wanted to delve into what you meant by that, because I think this ties into other issues like the Epstein class. I think Gen Z is more aware, maybe, than any other previous generation of just the rot we see everywhere.
It's true for sure. A lot of people say that's just the internet, but the internet's been around longer than Gen Z. In my opinion, it's mainly social media and short form content. I've seen a lot of short form content such as TikToks, YouTube Shorts. They like to take stuff from, say, podcasts with a lot of interesting people on there who will give their stories and opinions on our country and history that you don't really learn from TV or school like most people learned before. Especially popular are a lot of ex-CIA guys ex-Navy SEALs, Special Forces, people like that. And
You mean
it's
like the Colonel McGregors and figures like that, or
oh, exactly, yeah.
okay.
And it's caused a lot of people my age to ask more questions and look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, there's not, the mainstream media, the sort of Fox News and MS Nows of the world can't really gatekeep the younger generation. I mean, you can literally just go on YouTube and type in Judge Andrew Napolitano, or you can go to antiwar.com and see a completely different perspective. And not just that, but I mean, we've lived through this Gaza war. I mean, on TikTok, you're just being bombarded with footage of what's happening to these innocent children on our taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. And a lot of I mentioned this too, a lot of war footage from Ukraine is also very readily available. And that's not only understandably made people, face the realities of war as close as they can, but these wars are a result of our government and our government's actions. And it really creates a new perspective on them when you look at it that way.
It was interesting. You started out the article talking about the change of names with the Department of Defense now being called the Department of War. I was just curious, what made you want to focus in on that just as the opener? I think it's a good hook because you sort of say that, well, this is just business as usual. In a way, it's more transparent.
Well, that was actually when Trump made that executive order. I actually, this is something I thought to myself. I was like, well, at least he's being honest, and that was back in September. And now with all this stuff in Iran and everything going on, I'm like, you know, it really is kind of a return to honesty because, when you really think about it, we haven't really defended ourselves in the true sense of the word for decades now.
Well, that's the thing. I think Gen Z, at least the Gen Z voices I talk to, people like yourself, I think there is this understanding that for all the propaganda we're bombarded with, that if we don't do something now, the terrorists will get us later. The fact is, I mean, America's sort of like an island. I mean, we have prime real estate. We're not, uh, I mean, we're separated by two oceans, right, from a lot of other countries. And it just seems unlikely that we're going to be attacked offensively. It hasn't really happened that often.
Exactly, yeah.
So, in terms of skepticism of interventionism amongst Gen Z, do you think it ties into a broader distrust of institutions? Again, getting back to, I guess, this distrust that is brewing also because of the Epstein class issue.
Yeah, I think it actually ties a lot into the whole Epstein thing. Um, in terms of yeah, I mean, you could see in
You
Iran
cut out there for a second. You said in terms of,
tension, I think it's definitely our opposition to war definitely started with intervention in terms of in the Middle East and as well as Venezuela. There's been a lot of opposition to that, but it all circles back to the government as a whole. Like you said with the Epstein class, that especially on social media just led to what I think is kind of an acceptance of conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And it's just created a very real sentiment of distrust and um, aversion to our government, our institutions.
I wanted to ask your thoughts on that because I know we always hear the hand wringing in a lot of mainstream outlets, and even I have family members that will complain about, oh, there's too much distrust, there's too many conspiracy theories, and I do think there's conspiracy theories that are like really out there that I don't buy into,
Oh, of
but I'm
course.
not I'm not sure it's all necessarily bad. Maybe we need a healthy dose of skepticism. So how do you respond to people that think, oh, well, this is horrible. There's such a lack of trust on the part of Gen Z because I think there's a flip side to that where it can be very positive as well.
I if I'd respond to people like that, I'd either think that they're honestly, I think um they just they just want to be ignorant. I think a lot of people who say that are older. They grew up in a much different era in America where maybe it was more beneficial to trust institutions. The country was a lot better off, and they just they can't put themselves into the shoes of younger people these days because they just simply don't know what it's like, and um, they want to see a strong America, as we all do, and they see what you call, the healthy skepticism. They see that as, well, unhealthy. And um, yeah, to that I can just say they just want to bury their heads in the sand, I guess.
They're out of touch.
Exactly.
Um, so do you think Gen Z is rejecting war itself, or do you think it's more a questioning the way the US has conducted foreign policy over the past, I guess, 25 years? I would say even more than that, but
I would say the latter. Like we talked about earlier, our country is, you know, defended by two oceans on both sides. We've never really had a proper invading force attack us. So throughout our history, since after the Civil War, I'd say our whole approach to war is foreign engagements, and intervention. And I'd say the two are pretty much coterminous in American society, war and intervention. I believe that if there was a war in which we were quite literally fighting for our freedom, like, those in Ukraine, a lot of Gen Z support Ukraine and their military. Yeah, I can see people supporting a war, but just as it is right now, to America, war is just traveling abroad and bombing people we don't know.
you also wrote in the piece that Gen Z has been forced to mature during a pandemic, climate change, and crises in student debt and unemployment. How do you think that figures into how Gen Z sees foreign policy and also just uh, American politics more generally?
I think it really fueled a lot of ideas about domestic policy. The stuff with unemployment, healthcare, they've become very hot button topics in the past few years. As you could see recently, there's a lot of popularity among like left-wing movements, socialist movements, and I think the fact that we've had to go through all that at such a young age, it's made us want to focus on our country more than our allies abroad.
That's another issue I wanted to get into is do you think this goes past sort of traditional left-right divides? I mean, for Gen Z, is the issue of war and peace bigger than just, this is an indicator that I'm left wing, this is an indicator that I'm right wing? Do you think that anti-interventionism or anti-war sentiments sort of transcend that amongst Gen Z?
I think I think deep down it does. Although if we were to see anything major like that, it would, in my opinion, take some time. Fundamentally, I think it transcends partisan lines, especially with the Iran stuff and Israel stuff. You saw back a few years ago, most anti-Israel proponents were from the left wing, but now that Trump has started this war in Iran, which has proven to be very, very much of a failure for our country, a lot of former Trump supporters and just other people on the right wing are starting to go against that kind of foreign policy decision making.
I know this is really speculative, but what do you think a strong anti-war politics might look like for a new generation?
Um, I think it would just be a lot less intervention. Um, Definitely, like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of Gen Z politics is focused more on domestic issues, such as public infrastructure, healthcare, education. Um, I think if when my generation is in charge, I think there will be a lot less drive to go overseas and fight wars. And I speculate that it'll be mainly restricted to protecting important interests, but I couldn't say for sure.
And I also wanted to ask you, what do you think the relationship of Gen Z and foreign policy will be heading into like the next few years? I mean, I know again that's speculative, but what do you see Gen Z pushing for, I guess?
In terms of foreign policy?
Yeah, just more anti-interventionism or
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, uh, I can't really speak for my generation in terms of some of our current allies. Though the anti-Israel sentiment will probably see that relationship deteriorating in the next decade or so, when my generation comes into power. But again, I couldn't really say.
okay. Are there any points in the article that you really wanted my listeners to maybe latch on to, or what are some of the maybe flash points you really wanted to get across?
Just something I really was trying to focus on was the stuff about knowing too much and the effects of social media on our political thinking. I think it's um, an under-discussed topic, and I think it's fueled just a lot of the stuff we've been discussing in terms of mistrust and whatnot. Something I did want to bring up is that with the conspiracy theories, you could see this all over the internet, but people are really, from what I've seen, starting to buy into the idea of like false flags and stuff like that. And I think, social media and the um, heavy amount of distribution of this type of content in the short form, especially, it's it's fueling a lot of thoughts in people um, in that
What
regard.
was your first exposure on social media to sort of, or what was your first exposure to alternative media within these sort of online ecosystems? I hope that's an okay question to ask.
Oh no, no, it's fine. For me, I was 2016. I was in eighth grade, and I was using Instagram, and that's kind of where it started for me. Because there's a lot of very active political groups and channels and accounts on Instagram, and especially during 2016, because that was during the Hillary and Trump election, and people were using it as an opportunity to just voice any opinions they had, not just on American politics, but just radical politics in general, left and right.
Were there any specific voices that sort of became go-tos for you though, or like for
Uh,
me, like since you work at antiwar.com, I was reading anti-war when I was like 15 in high school. So I'm always interested, like where were you getting your information from when you had your sort of political awakening?
well, I'm embarrassed to say, but it was a lot of social media.
Okay,
There's
okay.
a lot of stuff like that. I mean, of course, I've read articles my whole life that I would find, links and stuff, but especially when you're that age, it's really easy to just get sucked into that and just get all your info from there,
So it
which
was
is
just different influencers and maybe clips from different types of shows, or
um basically stuff like that. I mean, I don't know too much because I was pretty young at the time, but back then there wasn't a lot of short form content didn't really exist. It was mainly a lot of just accounts. Some of them were influencers, but it was pretty easy to just, make your own page, gain a following, and then, you say whatever you want to that following.
Mhm. Do you think this will continue in the future, or do you think, I mean, I know this is really out there, but I feel like there's a big sort of push to attack social media now, a lot of this like, oh, we have to protect our children from the internet type mentality. And I think a lot of it is about squelching dissent.
I think the internet as it is now, it's gonna be around um to stay. I A lot of people do want to get rid of social media and all that because of, mental health reasons, which is valid. The whole brain rot thing, it's a whole nother topic entirely. But that has had a significant negative effect on people my age. The whole doom scrolling thing, and that all intersects with the political stuff. Because I mean, I know people personally that they will just like on Instagram, for instance, they'll just swipe and scroll through the same type of political content, and it becomes an echo chamber. And I could see why people would want to restrict that and get rid of it, but I do think you're right. I mean, there is stuff on there that is pretty damning for certain groups and people, and I don't know. We'll just have to see.
Just two more questions. I was wondering, how do you navigate the sort of social media sphere when it comes to politics? Like, what's the Because even sometimes I'll admit I've had times where I'll be snookered by a BS story that's just a meme and I'll believe it.
Hmm.
And given that I'm so public with this show, I get really embarrassed. Luckily I've never said anything on this show that I got from uh, an incorrect social media source, but I've been snookered at times just looking at stuff and believing it. So how do you navigate the sort of minefield of truth and fiction?
Personally, me, I actually don't really use too many social media apps. I don't use Instagram anymore, Snapchat. I've never used TikTok. But you get a lot of stuff on YouTube. Sometimes, I'm bored, I'll flip through YouTube. But for me, I mean, especially my generation, a lot of our algorithms are not just strictly politics. It's just complete nonsense at the same time. So I say what I do is it's hard, but I try to distance myself and I try to just lump all of it into just one thing. Whether it's a meme, whether it's political, I don't know who's made it. It could be some random kid, it could be some Russian bot, I don't know. But, you just can't, I just don't think you can really, you got to take everything with a grain of salt on the internet, in my opinion.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you is, I mean, have you seen this with your own circles, because you're from Gen Z, so do you also see this amongst your cohorts within that generation? I mean, how much of these sentiments do you see amongst your peers?
I see it often, not just people I know. I've heard people talk about it at work too. People talk about it with me. And it's a lot of times it's stuff that I've seen in maybe a comment or something I've just randomly come across on a post or a video or something. It's definitely very prevalent.
And I guess what are you hoping for with your continued work with the great folks at antiwar.com? What do you have cooking so far?
I'm currently writing up something on are you familiar with Dan Grazer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he recently did a report on US air power and how we need to shift our strategies to be a successful military. So I'm going to be writing something about that. Um, yeah, it's mainly military and politics.
Okay, great, great. Well, I look forward to reading more of your work, and I'm happy another Vlahos is writing and doing these op-eds and working with antiwar.com. So thanks so much for coming on Parallax Views. How can my listeners keep up with you? It sounds like you're not on social media as much, so just antiwar.com or
Yeah, I'll be there. I have a LinkedIn as well, but hopefully will probably get set up on X there, if people want to keep up with me, but we'll see.
okay, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
A special thanks to my $10 and above tier supporters on Patreon who make this show possible with their generous donations. Producers credits shout out to those supporters: Aaron, Fabian, Jeremy, Matt, Big Bob's Beepers, James, Enoch, David, Sadad, Tristan, Bob, Eva, Miriam, West Bank Robbery Pod, B. Lund, Transnatural Perspectives Podcast, Dan, Nick, Elliot, Fabian, Tom, Arlen, Bo, Spartacus, James, G, Jamie, Will, JC, WV, Sutra, Orc, Catherine, Aaron, Darko, Nathan, Holland, Dan, Mark, Chase, Olm, Gary, Nobody, Emilia, Nick, Brace, Michael, and Brian. please join those listeners in supporting me at the $10 and above tier of my Patreon page, patreon.com/Parallax Views, if you'd like your very own producer's credit on each and every edition of the program. Until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.